Good evening, friends. We are back again after a small gap. The reason being that the first bunch of classes was more like demo classes, and we were covering mostly the uh, topics which are there in the syllabus, in the civil services examination syllabus for law optional. But then, after interacting with a few of you, I found that a majority of you are not with the law background. That means you have interest, you have passion for law, and you have taken the right decision of choosing law as your optional for the mains examination for next year. But you do not have the law background. That means you do not have the academic background in law. You have not studied law. So, when I saw the response from a few of you, in fact, in the form of your written notes and our interaction, personal interaction with each one of you, I realized that unless uh, some basics of law are made clear to you, it will be a little difficult for you to understand the complex issues involving law. The complexity of law as a subject. It is not very complex subject, but definitely it is not a subject which can be understood by merely reading the books. You have to first, understand what law is, how it has evolved over a period of time. Why do we need law? Okay, what is the need for law? Though all of you very well know that uh, ignorance of law is no excuse, even for an illiterate person also who has not even studied, who can't even read or write. So, law is so important in our lives that nobody can escape law. So, and particularly when you are a student of law, and that too for such a prestigious examination like civil services, your knowledge of law has to be, uh, I think, much, much better than even the law graduates. Those who are practicing advocates or those who are practicing law in various fields, the knowledge which is expected out of you is the level has to be very, very high. So, in that case, it becomes my first duty to make you understand the basics of the subject. What subject you are reading, what subject you are learning, what are you learning? That's very important. I mean, it's not merely reading any academic subject like sociology or political science. You learn certain theories and you mug up the theories and you apply them, you answer the questions. Here, it is like a mathematical subject. People call it's very technical subject, but I don't call it technical. Yes, of course, technical because the principles of law are applied to given situations. So that in that manner, yes, it is technical, but once you know the basics, once you know the principles, you have learnt them, and you have learnt them not as an academic subject, but as uh, a technique which can be applied to a given set of facts, circumstances, and then reach a logical, rational conclusion. So that is how I wanted to proceed. That's why I have taken understanding of law as today's topic of discussion. What do we understand by law? People say, yes, you must follow law. This is the new law. But what is law? What do we understand as a layman? Let us start with as a layman first. We try to understand it, and then slowly we will reach that level where we can tackle the difficult terms and apply these terms in the various forms, facts, circumstances, so that we are able to handle this examination. So, first question which occurs to our minds is, what is this subject law? What this word actually means? What is understood by that? In common this thing, what law refers is to a system of rules. System of rules created and enforced. Now, these are the three different terminologies which will make us understand uh, what exactly is law and how it is used, how it is applied. Definitely, it is certain system of rules. Now, who creates them? That we will see later, but it is created. It is there everywhere, but then it is created for a particular purpose. And enforced. What do you mean by enforce? Enforce is which has to be applied and which, if it is not followed, has certain punishment which are called sanctions. So, a law without an enforceability is no law. So, one thing we have to be very clear that it is a set of rules, a system of rules. For what purpose? We will learn now. But those set of rules have to be first created by various means. That also today we will learn how this set of rules or the system of rules is created, and then they have to be enforced. Enforced, some laws are for general purpose and some laws are specific laws. That means they are meant for specific section of the people or society. So, and wherever they are applied, wherever they are enforced, they have to be obeyed. That means you, for whichever section of the society these set of rules are made, must obey them. A disobedience of law attracts what? Penalty, sanctions, which are there provided in those set of rules itself. So, through social or governmental institutions to regulate the behavior. Now, I want to bring you to this word behavior. Very, very important. Please make a note of it. And one thing, let me tell you that today you might not have received the notes, because this is a subject which has to be understood. That's why I called it understanding of law. So whatever I am saying, I am discussing with you, you must first understand them and try to make your own notes as per your understanding. The notes will follow. It's not that we will not provide you with the notes, written notes. They will come. You will get them definitely. But before that, before sending you the written notes, I wanted to make it sure that whatever I am discussing here, it should get into your brain, should set into your mind firmly, so that you yourself can reproduce and rewrite them. So first, you must note down that this is a keyword: behavior, system of rules, created and enforced. These four words, first just note down. We will slowly go to their simplification. Now, what is the purpose of law? See, what happened, our society has evolved over a period of time. If you look into ancient times, I'm talking of like periods like Stone Age, when human beings were, just moving around individually, not in a group. There were individual existence of, see, it is laws as old as even before the history is known to us, law was there. But in what form? How it evolved from that period till the modern times, today's times, we will go through that journey. But try to understand the first, just think of man as, Adam and Eve, single person, single personality, not as a family, not as a group, not as a clan, not as a nation, not as a global community. So we have to start with individual. Individuals, they were roaming around here and there, and their behavior was not controlled or regulated by anyone. They themselves were controlling their own behavior for themselves and for everything around them, whether another human being or nature, in the form of animals or plants, anything. So they were not controlled, they were not regulated by anything. Their behavior, again, I am coming back to behavior, the behavior was left to them only, how to behave with nature, how to behave with others. So there was no order set. But when we look at the purpose of law, we see that we have to maintain order in the society. We have to establish certain standards. We have to protect the liberties. That means we have to give them certain rights. And when in the society there are disputes, we have to resolve those disputes. These are few of the purposes. We cannot confine law to only a few named classes or purposes. It has got very, very wide scope. As I said, ignorance of law is no excuse. That means everybody must know law. It is presumed that we all know law, whether we are educated, not educated, with legal background or non-legal background, we are supposed to know law. So it is such a fascinating subject that even a common illiterate person has to know this subject. But how much they do know is a different matter that we will see, how we as law students or as legal professionals are different from those who have no exposure of law as an academic subject. But in day-to-day life, yes, everybody experiences law. So what is the scope of law? Basically, it can be divided into public law and private law. So public law concerns what? Government, society. So these are some of the laws which we will see now. Private law is between the individuals. or between one set of individuals and another set of individuals. So they set the law between them, how their behavior will be towards each other. When it comes to public law, how their behavior has to be regulated or controlled vis-a-vis the society, the other people living in the society. Okay, so law deals with legal disputes between individuals or organizations. Examples are like contracts, property, etc. We will see them later. Now we come to the important aspect of law, that how it has evolved. We have now made one thing clear, that law is there to control or regulate the behavior of human beings. How it evolved over a period of time, let us go through that journey now. Before even history was recorded, we do not know. We have some idea about the Adam and Eve and the Stone Age man and other things, but before even we have the recorded history, even that time also, law was there. In what form? Perhaps we do not know. But since human beings are there, their behavior is there, the behavior, how it is regulated, how they used to live during those times, they must be following some kind of behavioral, systems. And those behavioral systems were nothing but what we call today as law. So basically, what we look at is how the disputes at that time were settled. See, when there are two or more human beings, we cannot agree. Those two or more human beings, it's a human nature. They cannot agree to everything all the times. There are bound to be differences of opinion, the manner in which we live, the manner in which they behave with each other. So during that process, there are bound to be disputes. There are bound to be conflicts, various kinds of conflicts. It can be violent conflict or it can be a silent conflict. Silent means, that means they are having a conflict or a dispute with respect to something they want to possess. I have a pen, the other person also wants to possess this one. So I own it, he says no, I own it, there is a dispute. So for everything, each and everything where we are dealing with others, there are bound to be some kind of conflicts or disputes in spite of near perfect understanding between them. So resolution of disputes is one aspect of law. I'm just saying one aspect because there are other aspects also which we will see. Law evolved differently in different nations in accordance with the needs and requirements. Now, law always evolves according to the needs and requirements of the human beings. And with changing times, it's such a dynamic subject that with changing times, every day we find that new laws are evolving because needs and requirements of the human beings are changing according to times. Okay? Previously, we didn't have different modes of travel, which were very primitive now for us. So, a different kind of regulation was required. Then we got motorized vehicles, we got aeroplanes, we have got now rockets. So, how these things, the needs of the human beings, they evolved, and with the help of development of science and technology, new things are being added. Now, to regulate them so that no disorder is created in the society. The main purpose of law is to bring society to a definite order. How? Through the control of behaviors. So, initial stage, when I am talking of ancient times, it was free for all. We do not know what kind of laws were there at that time. So, there was no social system because man used to live alone and not as a group or a clan or a society. So they were depending on nature, basically, how plants, animals for their food and other livelihood requirements. So law of nature is that is the survival of the fittest. This was the main, law which evolved in the natural process through the nature, survival of the fittest. So they were not organized. There was an unorganized way of living. So we do not know what kind of laws were there and how their unorganized living behavior was controlled or regulated. So slowly they started developing into clans. So human beings started living in groups. Maybe the first unit would have been the family. Then came the neighborhood. Okay. After that came the, a section of the society. Then with territorial development, settlement, perhaps a state or a nation. That's how we will see now. So there were no human settlements at that time. Clans were moving from one place to another and they used to fight with each other for their survival. So, survival of the fittest. So, leader of the clan emerged out of that clan itself. From among the members of that clan, the leader emerged and his commands were followed by other members. So, here the command structure started coming into being. And there was a leader controlling the followers. How? Through the commands. Right? So slowly they started settling down in certain areas. Earlier, the clans were moving from one place to another. There was no system of possession. Possession of what? Control and possession of land or territory. So now we we have the knowledge of what? Indus Valley civilization. As per the history, they were well settled in certain parts, the cities, very well developed according to those times. Architecture, they had currency, they had language. Of course, we have not been able to decipher that language, but that language was there, modes of communication were there. They used to grow, agriculture was there, their cities were well planned. So, but everything had to happen under certain system of regulations. So, definitely laws would have been there by to be made, created by their leader and to be followed by the followers. So, norms started to develop. people shifted from no social system to organized way of living. Earlier we said there was no organized living, but now slowly the social system started developing. So they started following. Now, with this came another important term, customs. Whatever that clan or a group or that social system started following certain their own created principles, that how they will get married, how their children will be brought up, what kind of education will be there, what kind of rituals they will follow. I'm not talking of only religious rituals, but there were other social rituals also for establishing relationship between the different members of the that social group. So those rituals became the customs because they were being what? Regularly followed. So those were regularly followed uniformly. Uniformity was there, and most important, continuity. There was hardly any break in them, their usage. So the customs were being followed, they were created by that social system, followed by almost everybody, and there was a continuity and they were being uniformly followed. So, because of following these customs, a customary law developed. Law means again these customs started what? Regulating their behavior. Because everybody was following them. That is why their behavior was getting controlled or regulated by those customs, and we now call it as customary law. Various customs and usages containing religious beliefs. Now, slowly the concept of religion developed. Okay, we call that Hinduism is one of the oldest religion in the world. And if we see the Hindu mythology, we have, you know, Mahabharata, we have Ramayana, we have Bhagavad Gita, we have, which tell us about how the governance was there at that time, what customs were being followed, what laws were there, how the king used to control the subjects. So, how the human behavior was being controlled was there, and then the religion came and the religious beliefs were being followed by those religious denominations. And those religious beliefs took the form of what? Law, because they were regulating the behavior of the persons. So they were the beliefs and rules providing for some kind of control over the behavior of person in the society which had developed at that time. A kind of social order. So slowly we have been moving, the human beings have been moving from unorganized to organized, getting into social system, developing their own rules through customs and through religious beliefs and through different kind of rules and regulations created by the rulers, those who used to control them, and then a behavior regulatory mechanism was developed, so a social order was obtained. Why do we call law and order? It's still being the term very much used, law and order. Order means that everything has to be in the form which is acceptable to the society, which is for the benefit of the society. So the people moving here and there without any traffic regulation, that creates what? Disorder. But when we regulate the traffic, it becomes a orderly way of moving the traffic. We have the red lights, we have the different kinds of regulations for movement of vehicles and persons. But if those rules, regulations are not there, then there will be what? Disorder. So these kind of rules, regulations, and regulatory mechanisms created what? A social order. So several kinds of personal laws came into being. What do you mean by personal laws? Because different kinds of religions started developing. We have Christianity, we have Muslim religion, we had Hindu religion, we have Buddhism. So those personal laws, each religion, like Muslims have got what? Shariat. Shariat is their supreme law. That is their personal law, which is not applicable to non-Muslims. So a particular religious denomination or religious sect started developing their own personal laws, which is even till date being followed. So people belonging to same religious sects, denominations started following their own laws. Sometimes, like during Mughal times, we have seen even the non-Muslims were forced to follow certain Muslim laws. If a Jizya was imposed, it was being, imposed on non-Muslims also, but because they were the rulers and the subjects had to follow. But since it was the Mughals were following Islam, so they were imposing Islamic Shariat rules, Shariat laws on non-Muslims also. Now, what do we mean by jurisprudence? Now, having got some idea about what the law is, what is the scope of law, how it has evolved over a period of time, now we come to jurisprudence. Another word is jurisprudence, which is being used in legal parlance very commonly and which you all must know. It has come from Latin words jurisprudentia. Juris refers to law and prudentia refers to knowledge, study, knowledge, or science of law. Very, very important term because we keep on using jurisprudence. So you must know what does it mean. There are various schools of jurisprudence. Why? Because there have been many knowledgeable persons who have looked at law in their own way, in their own perspective. And according to their thinking, their way of looking at law, their own interpretation of the term law, certain schools have developed. Like we have analytical school, sociological school, realistic school, historical school, philosophical school. Now, I will not teach you these schools. These are totally out of our purview and out of our scope of guidance for your examination point of view and for your even knowledge point of view. Yes, if you are studying law, you will be taught this in your law schools as a different subject. Jurisprudence, various theories of jurisprudence. So I'm not going to take you through this process of teaching various schools of jurisprudence. But you must know that all the jurists who have propounded these schools have looked at law from their own point of view and have given reasons for that you can study if you have interest in that. So modern jurists have defined law from different angles. I'll just quickly take you through that. Some have defined it on the basis of its nature, some concentrate mainly on its sources, and again some define law in terms of its effect on society. So they have looked into the definition of law in different manners, like its nature, what is the nature of law, what is its source from where it has developed, and what is its effect on society. So based on that, different schools of jurisprudence have developed. Like Keaton said, to attempt to establish a single definition of law. See, there cannot be a single definition of law. What I am going to tell you for the purpose of your understanding of law is that law basically creates what? Rights and duties. Right? So I'll take you to that, but quickly just go through this. Law, in its most general and comprehensive sense, signifies a rule of action and is applied indiscriminately to all kinds of actions, whether animals from which it is continually striving to escape. Different views by different, jurists. As the body of principles recognized and applied by the state for the administration of justice. A new word has come, administration of justice. We will see further. Let us just quickly go through this. Very famous, Roscoe Pound, social control through systematic application of force of politically organized society. Don't get into these complex terminologies. This is not my purpose to teach you these terminologies or these phrases or these definitions of different schools of jurisprudence, but you must not be totally ignorant of them. Law is a system of rules, primary and secondary rules. Their union or combination may justly be regarded as the essence of law. Just for your knowledge, nothing more than that. Now we come to the modern stage, our present times. Modern law as it is today, globally in various countries, has been broadly divided into two. One is common law, other is the civil law. What is the difference between the two? Now we will see. So common law is traced back to English monarchy. We are following that law. How? We will see. Lawyers make presentations to the judges. Now what do we see in the courts? What happens? Judge is the presiding officer of the court. There are lawyers or representing their parties on both the sides. Party 1, Party B, A or B. They present their case to the judge. Or it used to be jury earlier. Now we do not have a jury system. And examine witnesses themselves. The lawyers themselves examine the witness. The judge may ask certain questions for his own clarification, but primarily the lawyers are examining the witnesses or examining the admissibility of the evidence. judicial decisions are binding. That means whatever the judge has decided becomes binding on both the parties. And the judgment of the highest court will be binding on all other courts which are lower in the hierarchy. So, how they can be overturned? Either by the same court or through a legislation, that is passing of a new law. Extensive freedom of contract. That means, what is contract? I told you, the public law is between the government and the members of the society or the subjects. Private law is between two or more persons or groups of individuals. They create their own law through what? Through contract. And they have extensive freedom of, entering into contract, subject to certain laws, regulatory laws that we will see. We have Indian Contract Act, which we'll be studying during the course of our preparation. But it is a private law primarily, which both the parties decide as to what to do. As I gave you the example that if I want to sell you this pen for 10 rupees and you accept it, then it is a contract created between both of us. In that case, if you want to purchase it for 10 rupees, you will accept my offer and it will become contract, which will be binding on both of us. If I or you fail to perform our duties as per that contract, suppose you give me 10 rupees, I refuse to give you the pen. So, I am breaching the contract. That means I am breaching a law which we both have created. It's a private law. So, in that case, under the common law system, we have a very extensive freedom of contracting. Generally, everything is permitted that is not expressly prohibited by law. That means so much of freedom is given to the subjects. Unless there is a specific prohibition by law, we have much more freedom in our behavior. As again and again I am telling, law is controlling the behavior. Law's main purpose is to control the behavior of its subjects. So, but here, unless that law puts a prohibition on us, we have a good amount of behavioral freedom. So, the common law countries are USA, England, India, Canada, etc. So, we are following the common law system. Why I am telling you, you should not be ignorant of the thing. As a law student, you must know which system of law we are following. Now we come to the civil law. How it is different. See, there, if you see, the role of judge was very passive. Judge was sitting, as we see every day, judge is sitting. The lawyers have a very active role to play. But in the civil law system, first thing, it is a codified system of law. How it is codified, I'll tell you. Don't get afraid by this word codified. I'll take you there now. It takes its origin is in Roman law. Just remember this, but don't get into the theories of what is Roman law and what is that law. Just remember what I am telling you. Concentrate on common law and civil law. There is a generally written constitution based on specific codes which are having basic rights and duties. Now here the word rights and duties has been mentioned, which I'll again explain to you. Only legislative enactments are considered binding for all. That means the case laws, the judge-made law. Judge doesn't make law. I mean, if you see, judiciary's role is interpretation of law. They are in common law system, they have a very passive role. But one thing remember, what we just saw, that their decisions are binding. And anything which is binding and controls the behavior is what? Is a law. So in that manner, judges are making laws. So it's called judge-made law, but not in the case of civil law system where the legislative laws have the supremacy. Judges are often described as investigators. So in our system, in common law system, judges were passive. They had no role. They do not investigate themselves. They do not probe into the allegations. They listen to the evidence before them and decide the case, adjudicate. So, but in the civil law system, they have more active role to play. So they bring about charges, they establish facts through witness examination. There the judges are examining the witnesses. So less freedom of contract. We had seen in common law system, there is extensive freedom of entering into contract, but in civil law system, there are less. They are controlled by other laws. So parties cannot contract out of certain provisions of law. So the freedom of parties to enter into contracts is limited through or is restricted through laws. So some of the civil law countries are China, Japan, Germany, and France. So based on these systems, basically, primarily, two different legal systems have developed. Adversarial system and inquisitorial system. What are these systems? Let us see. Adversarial system. The court proceedings in countries that have common law like ours are adversarial in nature. The court acts as a referee between the prosecution and the defense. Prosecution is what? Now, we are talking of the criminal part where the state is the prosecutor. Why it is so? We will see when we come to the criminal law system. And the other party has to defend himself. The whole process is a contest between two parties. As regards crime, these two parties are the state and the person accused. Now, here is the difference. When the dispute is between two parties, in that case, only those two parties are getting affected because of that dispute. As I said, in the case of breach of contract, who are the parties who get affected, adversely affected? The parties to the contract. The third party is not at all concerned with that, or they are not affected by that. Only those two parties who have the dispute get adversely affected. But if suppose a crime happens, now crime, though it is maybe between two individuals, A has committed the murder of B. So, if we look at that, A is the accused, B is the victim. But in the case of crimes, the whole society gets affected. How? If there is a murder, if there is a theft, if there is a robbery, what happens? If there is a rape, what happens? The whole society gets adversely affected. It's not only between the accused and the victim. As we see nowadays, why such a hue and cry for heinous crimes like gang rapes and murders, because it has its everlasting adverse effect on the minds of the common man. A sense of insecurity comes. And then whose duty is to provide that security? It is the duty of the state. It is the duty of the state to provide security to its subjects, to the citizens, and see that no such sense of insecurity prevails in the society, in the nation, in the state. So in that case, state has been given the responsibility of prosecuting that accused, not the victim's family. It is the duty of the state to take him to the court to see that he is punished if he is the culprit and has been termed as the culprit by the court. So it is the duty has not been laid upon the victim or his families or his legal heirs, but it is the duty of the state to see that the accused is tried and punished. In an adversarial system, rule of lawyers is active. In fact, it should be role of lawyers is active, which I just mentioned to you. The judges pronounce judgment depending on the hearing, evidence, or on the basis of examination and cross-examination. So, this is a process. Judges are simply judging the evidence before them, adjudicating, they are weighing the evidence, and then passing their judgments. Now, in inquisitorial system, the court is actively involved in proof of facts. In the common law, in the adversarial system, it was the person who accuses the other has to prove. The burden of proof is on the person who is making the accusation. If it is the state who is accusing a person of murder, it is for the state to prove that there is sufficient evidence against that accused person. If it is between two parties, the party who is alleging the breach against the other party has to prove it. Okay, so that is a general principle. There are certain conditions where the burden of proof shifts to the other party, which we are not concerned right now here. It is for understanding the legal system. The system resolving disputes and achieving justice for individuals and society. So, who is taking this active part is the judge in this case. There, the lawyers are passive. Role of lawyers is passive, whereas in common law system it was active. The judge plays an active role because he questions, he gets the proof, he gets the evidence, extracts the evidence. So, acting as an investigator himself. So, used in primarily country with civil legal system, as we have seen, Japan, China, France and Germany, etc. Now, let us see the Indian judicial system. It is one of the oldest legal systems in the world. More than 200 years of colonial rule, and that is why we have more or less adopted. First thing is we have totally adopted the common law system. Second is the system of courts functioning, courts hierarchy, which was mainly set during the British time, has not much changed. So we are still following that hierarchy of courts. So we are following the common law system. The transformation happened in various ways, but most relevant of this development was the setting up of a new type of judicial system which was based on the common law system. So if we look at our own history, from Mughal time to British time to the present time. Mughal time totally under the emperor or the king, the person who was controlling the state, single entity. Then came the British through the British Parliament's laws. And now we are independent after British rule since 1947. We have our own judicial system, which is based on the same common law system of the British, but the courts are functioning, the laws are being made by our own parliament and implemented here and interpreted by our own judicial system. So what is constitution now? I am slightly touching constitution because from tomorrow onwards we will be I'll set a course today itself that how we will be proceeding. So now I'll not be going too fast because most of you are with non-legal background and you need more time to study and understand the basic concepts. Once that stage is over, then of course you will be at par with others who have a sound legal knowledge. Then it will be very easy for you to keep pace with them. So, Constitution is the supreme law of the land, a system of laws and principles that act as a basis. This is more important, how the country is to be governed. This is laid down in the Constitution itself because it is the supreme law of the land. So, there are basically two types of constitutions. One is the written or codified constitution and unwritten or uncodified like we have in India, we have in USA. So we will take our own example that ours is a written and a codified constitution of India. This is our constitution. Unwritten is in United Kingdom, England. Best example is theirs. There it is unwritten. Just remember this much. You don't need to know more about that. Now we come to various kinds of laws. I told you criminal law, there's civil law, there's common law, statutory law. Now I'll come to this because this is important for you to understand what is statutory, what is statute. Statute is a written codified law. That means it is in this form. Let us take this Indian Evidence Act. This act was passed in 1872. Act 1 of 1872. I'll explain to you why it is written. And further amended by what? Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013. So that means this law is a codified, a written law, codified, and latest amendment was in 2013. So if there is any amendment, it will be written on the main, cover of the law, codified law itself. Inside, of course, will be there. And what has been amended, those terms, those parts will also be incorporated there. Some portion might be deleted, modified, or newly introduced. So this is the basic form of, this is called a statute. Why? Because it comes in the form of a law made by legislature, by a process of making law, which I will take you through in a few minutes from now. Just remember, statute, a written and codified law, and that is why it is called statutory law. Law can be further divided into substantive law. Now, these are the terms which, as a law student, we all must know. What is substantive law and what is procedural law? What is the difference between the two? See, this substantive law, as the name indicates, it has got the substance. That means it has the main, uh, it establishes the legal relationship between different individuals or between individuals and the state. Let us take the example. The Let us take the example of the Competition Act or Indian Penal Code. Now, Indian Penal Code is a substantive law. What it does, it defines various offenses. If this is done, this will amount to this offense, and this will be the punishment. So, it carries the substance of the legal relationship between either two individuals, as in the case of Contract Act or competition law, and in the case of Indian Penal Code, between the individuals and the state. I just explained why state comes into picture when it is a crime. So, in that case, Indian Penal Code is a substantive law. Now, how that relationship, if anything, any procedure is to be laid, how that relationship should be there, and in case of any breach or any offense being committed, what procedure is to be followed. So, in this case, the substantive law will be the Indian Penal Code, an example, IPC. The procedural law will be what? Criminal Procedure Code, Code of Criminal Procedure, and in civil matters, it will be CPC, Code of Civil Procedure Code, and also the Evidence Act, Indian Evidence Act, because they provide the procedure to be followed, and this provides the main relationship. As in the case of, let's see, Indian Evidence Act, it says what will be the fact, what will be the presumption, how the fact will be proved, how it will be disproved. In fact, we do not have this in our syllabus. We don't have procedural laws in our syllabus of law optional. We have only the substantive law in the case of law of crimes, which we will be studying in great details. But for you, as a law student, as a person with legal knowledge, must know the difference between the substantive law and the procedural law. So, how the law is made? Okay, we'll take the ordinary bills. There are certain other bills also, like money bills, etc., which have a different procedure. But we are talking of an ordinary law. So, what happens is, first thing is, why do we need new laws to be made? If there are already so many laws which are governing our behavior, which are providing us certain what? Rights and imposing certain duties on us. So, what happens? With changing situation, dynamic situation, see, our lives are changing, our living circumstances, everything is so dynamic, it is changing every day. So, in that condition, we need to change our behavior also. There is a need for regulating the behavior between the individuals or between different members of the society and the individuals on one side and the state on the other side. That is why new laws are being passed, new laws, are required for regulating new kinds of situations. So what happens is, the first, there is a need for law. Need for new laws. Why? Dynamic situations. Changing dynamic situations. So, to fulfill those conditions, to cope up with those changing situations, we need a new law. So, it all starts with the ideas getting from various sources, maybe from general public, maybe from experts, maybe from, like political scientists, psychologists, everybody. It can be any source. Through brainstorming, different ideas will come that a particular situation has evolved, how to address that, how to tackle that situation. So once those ideas come, they are written, then they are, after screening, there is a first reading, then there is a second reading, that to further filter the unwanted parts. Then it is sent to a select committee or a joint committee of the parliamentarians. Because remember, making laws is the role of the legislature. So it all happens in the parliament. They have their select committee. You might have heard, sometimes there is a demand that this particular bill should be referred to the select committee, because select committee has parliamentarians or members of parliament from different parties, so that they examine it and see that a unbiased and universally accepted law comes into being. So if it goes to select committee and then it is cleared, then there is a clause to clause discussion. This whole process takes time and sees the application of mind by the experts, by the parliamentarians who are the lawmakers. So they have to apply their expertise in such a manner that the final law, the final bill, I will say, it is not law yet, it is in the form of a bill only. If there is any mistake or undesirable part, it should be removed, so that the purpose for which that law is being created or enacted should be only met, not other things should be added or any distortion should come. So then there is a third reading, and that is the final reading before it goes for voting. So bills are introduced in Parliament. After passing of the bill, it receives President's assent, and then once it receives the assent, it is published in the Gazette, official Gazette, and it becomes now from bill to an act or statute. अब क्या होता है? Just see. Let me take the example of this Competition Act. Now, if you see, it is written the Competition Act 2002. That means this act, before it was passed, was introduced, or it was passed by the Parliament in the year 2002, received the assent of the President, and when it was published in the Gazette, it is called, within bracket, 12 of 2003. That means, though it was passed in 2002, it was gazetted, it was published in the Gazette as Act number 12, in serial number 12, in the year 2003, not in 2003, but the act will be called as Competition Act 2002, right? Similarly, if you take the Indian Evidence Act, the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013, that means this Amendment Act was passed by the Parliament in 2013, was published in 2013 itself, 13 of, that means serial number 13, and it came into effect from 3 to 2013. 3rd February 2013, it came into effect. Okay, if this date is not mentioned, then it will be mentioned in the law, in the act itself, from which date it will be enforced, it will come into force. Let us take a look at the Bayer Act. I tell you, it's not a accusation or it is a comment, adverse comment, but some of the law students, those who have studied law, passed the degree, they do not know what is Bayer Act. And it's very, very bad situation. See, Bayer Act is like this act, it is in this form. This is called Bayer Act. That means it has got only the enacted portion. It has no commentary, no comments, unless there are some specific comments in a particular section for the purpose of explanation. That is written in this. Otherwise, it is only a bare act, without any comments, without any commentary, without any remarks or observations from anyone. It is what the Parliament has passed and has been put on the official gazette. This is the look at the Bayer Act. We take the Constitution. This we call it as a Bayer Act. We don't call it Act because it is the supreme law of the land. It is called the Constitution of India. It's not called Constitution Act. It is Constitution of India. Yes, but if there is any amendment, that amendment is made by the Parliament, then it is called Act. Like Constitutional 104th Amendment Act 2013 with effect from 25/1/2020. So, Constitution is the supreme law. It is not referred to as an act. But if any amendment is done through any act passed by the Parliament, that has to be named as an act and published accordingly. So, this is the Bayer Act. Please remember. Similarly, for IPC, Indian Penal Code, passed in 1860, it is 45, 1860, amended from time to time, and the last amendment was in the year 2018, which came into with retrospective effect. That means it will apply, from the day before even the date it was enacted, with retrospective effect from 21/4/2018. So, everything is written on the Bayer Act. A Bayer Act contains the rules or provisions relating to the matter discussed under law. To read and understand the law properly by reading a Bayer Act, one needs to know the structure of a Bayer Act. The Bayer Act contains the title of the Act. This is the title. On top of the text, below that in square brackets is the date will be mentioned. This date is the date of enactment, the date in which a bill becomes an act. In other words, that date signifies the date on which The President of India signed on the bill to approve the law. After this, there will be a preamble of the act. This is not part of now. This is very important to know. Here, the Constitution, the supreme law, has got a preamble in the beginning itself. When we open this, we will find there is a preamble. Preamble in the case of Constitution is a part of it. This has been very much made clear and interpreted by the highest judiciary. Whereas in the case of other acts, let us take the case of the Advocates Act of 1961. So what does it say? It has got a... Now, remember, in the case of other acts, there is an introduction, statement of object and reasons. This is very important. If you want to know why this particular act was made, this law was made, you will have to go to the statement of objects and the reasons for which this law has been created. Now, on the first part is the preamble, which in the case of this act, it reads, an act to amend and consolidate the law relating to legal practitioners and to provide for the constitution of bar councils and an all India bar. Now, this is the preamble. Preamble reflects the what is there inside the act, enactment, this statute, this law. What is there inside? The purpose of it, this is written in the form of preamble. For what purpose it has been made and what is there inside it. What purpose it is going to serve. So this is not the part. Below this is written, be it enacted by Parliament in the 12th year of the Republic of India as follows. So this is the heading, preamble and the heading. Then comes the title. Generally, the first section of any enactment gives the title. What is the title? Short title, extent and commencement. This act may be called as Advocates Act 1961. This is the title of this act, section 1. Generally, and then it extends to whole of India, etc., etc. It will be given in the section 1. Generally, the definitions are given in section 2. You will find here definition. So, various terms which have been used in the act are defined here. In the case of Indian Penal Code, which we will be studying when we study law of crimes, we will find that everything has been defined there in different sections. There are not only 2, but there are so many terms. What is offense? What is dishonestly? What is fraudulently? What is intention? Everything is defined. What is wrongful loss? What is wrongful gain? Etc. You will find it will be very interesting when we read that. But remember, the definitions are given in the bare act itself, because you must know where to find that definition if you come across any term. So this is how you have to understand the bare act. Identify nature and purpose through the statement of objects and purposes, extent of application, where it will be applied, interpretation and definitions will be there. Then read the sentences in 2 parts. This is very important while reading the bare acts. Don't read it as a text as a whole. If you want to understand, read it in parts of the sentences. Now, I'll quickly take you through some important legal terms which we should know as the law students. Accused, a person charged with having committed a crime or misdemeanor, a defendant in a criminal proceeding. Who is the he is a defendant, but in this case, who is accusing? The state. So he becomes the defendant in a criminal proceeding. He is called accused. Then acquit. Acquit means set free. He is let off. The guilt is not proved. Action. Any case, cause, suit. Suit will not study because it's civil law, but you must know when you file a plaint in the court, it becomes, and it is admitted, it becomes a suit. Where there is a controversy or dispute, or it is contested before a court of justice. Contested. That means you go to the court and contest on certain issue. Damages are paid. We'll study it in the law of contract, that how the, and law of torts also, how the damages are paid. What are damages? These are the money awarded by a court to a claimant. The other party has to pay that money to the plaintiff, to the person who is claimant. And then that money will be in the form of damages as compensation. Now what happens is, if there is a breach of contract, the party against whom the breach has occurred will suffer certain amount of loss, and that loss will be converted in terms of money, and that much money will be awarded to the claimant by the court. So that will be in the form of damages. Homicide, very important term. When we study law of crimes, section 299, culpable homicide, you must know what is homicide. Most of the students fail to tell me what is the definition of homicide. So it is basically killing of one human being by another. Remember this much. Okay? Bail, the amount of cash required or security to obtain the release of an accused from law enforcement custody, okay, before his case still under investigation, bail can be granted. Statute, a written law, I have already explained. Legislation, the process of making the law or enacting the laws. Precedent, which has earlier happened, an earlier event, it becomes precedent for the present situation, for the present case. That is why the old cases or the old similar events are quoted before the court. You look, in previous case, under similar circumstances, on the similar facts, this was the decision. So that decision will apply to this case also, that is taken as precedent. Ratio descent die is the rule of law. What happens is, this word you must remember. We generally call it ratio. Ratio is what a judicial decision is based upon. What they finally decide, it is the ratio of that case. There is a case which is before the judge, he has decided, a final decision is, then it will have a force of law. So that is the ratio in that particular case. Stare decisis is the legal principle of determining points in litigation according to precedent. The precedent is applied and the legal principle follows. Obiter dictum is a remark or a judge's expression during the proceedings, sometimes judges make certain statements. They are not part of the judgment. They are not part of ratio. Okay? They are not binding. They are just expressions of the judges, but sometimes they, or their opinion, they utter in the court or in a written judgment. Sometimes it comes in the judgment itself, but remember, they are not binding. Not legally binding as a precedent. They cannot be quoted as a legally binding precedent in other cases. So, friends, with this we come to an end. If you have, Himanshu, you have uh, something to ask me. Hello, Himanshu, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, welcome, Himanshu. Yes, tell me.
Sir, is ratio disadvantage the rule of law, the statute on which the judgment is based, or is it the decision of the judge itself?
It is not the statute, it is the decision of the court. What is there in the judgment? So, the final part of the judgment which decides the issue is the ratio, and that ratio becomes a precedent for any such further cases. Okay, so this is not from the statute, this is definitely from the court in their final judgment only. आवाज ऑन करना इनकी. Himanshu, are you satisfied or do you need any further explanation?
Yes, sir, completely satisfied.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions? Yes, tell me, Navanita, yes.
So can you repeat once more the meaning of precedent?
Precedent, okay. Right. I'll just go back to precedent. Okay. Now let us come to precedent. I'll give you one simple example. Okay. Suppose there is a dispute between A and B. This dispute occurred in the year, let us say, 2012. Right? The court finally decided this case in 2012 and passed a judgment. Right? So that a dispute between A and B was decided finally by the court in the year 2012 in their judgment. Now, on similar circumstances, suppose there was a breach of contract, let us take that example, and on similar conditions there is another breach of contract between C and D in the year 2019. So now what happens? C and D can take recourse to this judgment of 2012. You look, under the similar circumstances, the court, the highest court, or the court having the final judgment, final order, has passed this, and this is, we are under the similar circumstances. It may not exactly be same, but similar circumstances, same law is being applied, and facts and circumstances are almost the same. right? They may not be exactly the same. It's very, very, very difficult to have exactly same case. So in that case, this judgment, the ratio of in this judgment, you understand the ratio? I just explained it to Himanshu. The ratio of this judgment will be quoted as a precedent in this case. And the court will take cognizance of that. They will accept it as a precedent and may or may not apply. This is the discretion of the court. Court has to take a judicious decision. But this can be, put forward as a precedent that previous incident, precedent. So this previously has happened and this was the judgment of the highest court or the final judgment, and this may be taken into consideration. So this is what is precedent. Are you able to understand? If you have any
Yes,
doubt,
sir.
okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Navadita. Yes. Anybody else, please, before we conclude? And remember, we will be sending you the notes to you either tomorrow or day after on whatever I have explained to you. So don't worry, everything will be in your notes. But in the beginning itself, I told you that you must have your own notes made. I always insist to all my students that you make your own notes in your own handwriting, because finally in the examination, it is you who are going to write the answers in your own same handwriting. So this is how you will develop, your own art of writing. This will help you in the examination. Now, before I conclude for today, let me quickly take you through the syllabus. Okay, since this is going to be our first serious session, I'll just take you. Yeah. So you must all have this syllabus with you. Syllabus of the law optional paper of the civil services examination. Try to take the latest copy of it. I have 2018. I think if there's any later copy, you must take it. Paper 1 consists of constitutional and administrative law, first part, and international law. Now, let me tell you, before I take you to the hardcore topics of this first part, that is constitutional and administrative law, I want to prepare you for a better understanding of the terms which we generally use in our main topics, like federalism, constitutionalism. These are hardcore terms. Before that, I want to make you understand in the simplest words, in the simplest versions, as to what is constitution, how it was made, how important it is for us, for any nation for that matter, and how it addresses various issues, various, like issue of equality, affirmative action. These are all certain difficult terms, but before we try to understand them, I think we should first understand the basic issue of what is constitution, how should we read it, how should we, our own interpretation, how should we take the meaning out of it. It will then make you very, very comfortable when we go to the tougher portions of the constitution. So, for the next few days, I'll be taking you through these enactments in simplest words before we start taking up the individual topics of the syllabus. But by that time, you must have the syllabus with you and you go through it. Don't try, if you don't understand, don't bother much. We have sufficient time and I'll make everything clear to you. So the international law, then paper 2, we have law of crimes, which is basically Indian Penal Code, the offences against property, offences against body, general exceptions. Don't bother to just know that this is what you are going to study. Okay, then there is a law of contracts, there is law of torts in paper 2, and then contemporary legal developments. There are certain minor laws also, Negotiable Instrument Act that comes under mercantile law. There is Arbitration and Conciliation Act. We will cover everything in very, very simple and understandable manner. But before that, if we go for a bigger battle, we must be prepared with all our basics. We should know, we should sharpen our weapons, we should know how to operate them, how to make use of them before we jump into the real battle. So the next few days, we will be learning simple terms, and I'll request you not to miss any of the sessions, but these are very important. This will help you in tackling the tough issues later on. Okay, so with these words, I will conclude and we will meet tomorrow at around the
Sir.
same. Yes, please.
Sir, can you please repeat the name of the book?
Which book?
So the syllabus book.
Syllabus, you can just download it from the UPSC website itself.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, it's not a book. It's a book which contains all other subjects. Since you are not going to read other optional subjects, it will not be of any use to you. You can just take care of only the law optional subject. Okay, there are only 2 papers. Just download them. Keep a printout with you, and that is sufficient. Don't bother about. I'm sorry I showed you the book. I should not have scared you. Okay. So anyway, but just simply law optional syllabus. Keep it with you, and then we will slowly proceed towards that. I'm again repeating. I'm not going to touch the syllabus for few days at least. But I want to prepare you for the final assault on the topics which are mentioned in the syllabus. Okay? Any other issue? Any other thing you want to clarify or you ask me? Okay? Thank you very much and we'll meet tomorrow. All the best.
For more videos, subscribe to BN by IAS and press the bell icon to never miss an update.